So we have a lot to cover, and I want to make sure to leave enough time for Q&A. So I'm just going to dive right in, and we can take questions as we go, and I can try to answer them as they come into the chat box. Or depending on where we get them, I might wait until we cover a little bit more. So feel free along the way to type in the chat box. In theory, it's either at the bottom of your screen or it could be at the top. Currently, it's at the top of my screen. So the purpose of this webinar is largely during the annual meeting, we realized that it'd be helpful to do a demo. We are constantly trying to update features in TCI University based on feedback that we receive either from the online survey that happens annually or as any kind of help tickets or emails come into our info@tciurbanhealth.org email address, as well as what we hear from you as our master coaches. So we want to make sure that not only do we go over the purpose of TCI University and reorient ourselves to the main components, but we also want to share about the TCI website at large, because there are a number of places in which the website can help you along the 3 stages of TCI. So the expression of interest, the program design, as well as implementation. We've done some updates to this year. It's been busy with hub specific updates, as well as recent updates based on feedback from the annual meeting. So we want to make sure to share all that. So you all should be familiar that TCI University is basically a university without walls. It's a new way of thinking about learning as a lifelong process. Just like the Challenge Initiative is a different way of doing business, this mindset shift change requires us all to become constant learners. So really the goal is to ensure that we develop content and tools that are most helpful to you in coaching and that diffuse the proven approaches. So our primary audience for TCI University are the coaches who are providing coaching on these proven approaches and practices. Our secondary audience would be those who are coached who can come back on their own terms and time for reference materials to continue self-learning. So TCI University, where it contributes to the demand-driven model. So as you're all familiar with the stages, the expression of interest, program design, and implementation, you could largely say that the website is part of the marketing efforts. And so the expression of interest is available on TCI's website at large, and I'll show you that. And then TCI University in particular is really relevant to stages 2 and 3. And I've highlighted the boxes related to that. So before we jump in, let's familiarize ourselves a little bit with the website as well. And I wanted to start with where you can find the expression of interest. For those that aren't aware, if you go to up at the top bar of the website, you have the About, Where We Work, TCI University, News, and Work With Us. So if you go to Work With Us in cities, select cities from that list, you will get the 3 stages and information specifically for a city. And you can click on the link within that first box that says Expression of Interest Form. I've also included the link at the top. I'll make sure to circulate the slides for this after the presentation, as well as the audio recording. But just so you know, on the expression of interest, there includes guidance for the coach, we say hub, as well as for the city applicant. It includes the selection or eligibility criteria, and there's an option to input text directly into the online form, and you can submit it online as well. Or you can also save it and a link will be generated and you can come back to complete it. We recognize that the expression of interest has been adapted per hub setting. So what's in this version is what was the kind of standard that was shared that has been tweaked. But just so you know that this information and the eligibility criteria is all available to you on the website. Another area of the website that I wanted to share was where can I find information on each hub? So where we work. Kim has just created basically a meta portal for each hub. So if someone was visiting the website, or if yourself, if you decide to go to the website through this avenue of where we work, you can still get all your resources. So it can take you to the Paquet Tour, it could take you to the East Africa Toolkit, Nigeria Toolkit, or India Toolkit. And I will show you what this looks like. Specifically, we would have clicked on East Africa. So this is the kind of that portal landing page for East Africa. It gives the description of the implementing or coaching partner, and as well as some of the latest news feeds. And the blue box gives you direct links to the toolkit, specifically as it's divided up into the program areas, and recently added tools related specifically to the East Africa Toolkit in this regard. And then there's a contact us. This is the exact same setup across each regional hub. So if you don't want to go through the website that way, but you go directly to TCI University, then this is what you would see. Basically the three main components of TCI, which are the toolkits, the coaching, and community of practice. We see the toolkits as kind of the backbone or foundation of where all of the materials have been aggregated and housed. And coaching is what makes the materials all come to life. And then the community of practice ensures that there's a peer-to-peer exchange. So why do we have a global toolkit? You might be wondering, because I assume most of you would be providing coaching directly on your hub-specific toolkit. Well, the purpose really was to synthesize and reinforce what was already, what we already had and learned from the Urban Reproductive Health Initiative looking across. So it's really our aggregate toolkit. It's highlighting experiences from each individual URI, but it's really looking at what were some of the common approaches that had evidence. And then we tried to look at the tools that were used and try to make kind of generic template versions of them so that, say, we expand into new countries, not just geographies, that a country could easily adapt that tool and put logos on it for their purposes. In addition, it includes a number of global resources and links to help reinforce the materials. So how do you access TCI Toolkit? So you would need to always log in or register. I tend to almost always be logged in, so I somewhat skip that step. But if you look at the top of the website in that darker bluish purple bar, after the social media icons, there's the join the mail list, contact us, log out. So I was already logged in. So log in and register would be right there. And then you can go directly to the toolkit. You can also go directly to the toolkit, and on the right-hand side of that page would prompt you to log in. And that is true across the website, with the exception initially of the hub toolkits you could get to without necessarily being logged in. But we've recently are working on adding the assessment questions to each hub approach as well. And so because of that, folks will need to log in so that they can earn points and their certificates from filling out those questions. So the global toolkit is structured exactly like most of the hub-specific toolkits. You have your services and supply, your demand generation, advocacy, and in this case, we have this cross-cutting approaches called TCI Essentials. The difference, I would say, related to the global toolkit and also the AYO Rage Toolkit from the hub toolkits is that we do have what we call this site navigator, and it allows you to download PDF versions of each approach. So you would download what you would need which would be useful for, say, site visits, low connectivity areas, and these are also in English and in French. Now, sub-hub specific toolkits also, the hub has taken the initiative to provide download versions of their approaches as well, and I will show that shortly. So I just wanted to show kind of really quickly at a glance what's in each of the global toolkit program areas. And from the global toolkit, you can always get to the hub specific toolkits. They're actually incorporated at the bottom. I've tried to highlight that here, but also if you go to the toolkit menu, it's a drop down and you can always go back and forth between the toolkits. And you'll see that the approaches, a lot of them are exactly the same wording, or at least very similar to different approaches in the hub toolkit. So in the global, we say skilled providers, and a number of them, you might have it as capacity strengthening or capacity building. On the job training, in that regard, sometimes is incorporated into the capacity strengthening for the hub specific toolkits. Family planning integration, the facility makeovers or the 72-hour makeovers, health facility strengthening, whole site orientation, contraceptive commodity security, mobile service delivery. Now that was very evident in the URIs. We're doing a bit less of that. I would say FWA, that they have stronger connections with mobile service delivery, and it depends on how you define that. If it's also it includes integrated outreaches in the case of the global toolkit. Working with the private sector, and then fixed day service provision or fixed day static services. Or in some cases, some hubs say special FP days. So in demand generation, again, you can get to each of the hub specific toolkits from this landing page as well. And it covers what is the science behind behavior change. And then it goes into a number of the specific interventions that are kind of the most popular, as well as have the most evidence in supporting them from the Measurement, Learning, and Evaluation Project, which was the external evaluator of the URIs. So community health workers, or in the case of India, ASHAs, or in the case of FWA, it's community relays, integrated outreach, social mobilization, mass media, and then branding of family planning programs. And just to note that we recognize that some of this distinction between service delivery interventions versus demand generation, it's not always that there is an overlap. Like the case can also be made that community health workers should be a service delivery approach, because in some countries they can provide certain methods. So we do recognize that these aren't a perfect silo, like they fit just in one category, that oftentimes the most effective of these approaches are really overlapping between the various elements. And then advocacy, we've really focused on at the subnational level. So a lot of work that you all are doing with getting commitments and budget lines and resource mobilization, and then advocacy with family planning champions, as well as then media advocacy. So what you can find on each of the approach, we have a very standard format for the global and the AYO-Rage toolkits. Now, this format is a little different per hub. So each hub's toolkit has its own format that includes typically most of these elements, but it might have different elements just based on your context and the information that's available and needed. So cost considerations, sustainability, those are often additional kind of areas and elements of your hub specific toolkits. But for global and AYO-Rage, we kind of stick at this level that's a little bit higher level. And that's why a number of these are adapted for your hub specific toolkit. So there's the brief description of like what the intervention is, what are the benefits kind of bullet pointed out, and that could be used kind of as an advocacy messages. And then what are the steps to implementing that, and as well as helpful tips, challenges, as well as possible solutions. The helpful tips, challenges, and possible solutions often are on the right-hand side and kind of called out in call boxes. And then under those are usually the tools related to the approach, and then specifically what was the evidence. And most of that, as I mentioned, comes from URI and the Measurement, Learning, and Evaluation Project. Within your hub-specific toolkits, we've started to incorporate more of the evidence from TCI implementation. And as this year progresses, we will also be updating the global toolkit with that evidence as well. So some of the key features, any toolkit intervention or approach page has a search bar or box right above the list of interventions or approaches that you can go into. In addition, you can always take notes. So this blue button at the bottom of any, or kind of, it moves with the scrolling, any page, you can pop this open, you just click on it and you can start taking notes. And these notes will save to your profile. So this might be as part of your coaching. Maybe you're doing an on-demand coaching. So someone has contacted you via WhatsApp or via phone, and you can always kind of dictate, if you will, what you're sharing with them via this take notes, if that's helpful to you. In addition, as I mentioned, so in the global toolkit and in the AYO-Rage, there's a download or print this approach button, and then there's an assessment and a get a certificate button. So you start the assessment. The assessments are typically only like 3 to 5 questions, knowledge and comprehension related questions related to the content, meaning kind of what did you learn about this approach? And then there's always like a generic 1 or 2 questions about how do you plan to use this information? And depending on the score will depend on whether or not you get a certificate. And again, those are all saved on your profile, and we will show you where you can find that if you get that question. So one thing that's unique about the global toolkit is that we do have these essential pages. And the essential pages are really to talk about some of the cross-cutting issues that are important to TCI. So this effective leadership and mindset change, or it's also known as how to be a TCI leader, this incorporates currently information on coaching. We're looking within the next, say, quarter or 2 to pull out coaching as its own approach, actually kind of separate from the leadership, just so that we can give more information about how coaching is being operationalized per hub. As well as we'd like to layer in some video on key characteristics, profiles, for how to be an effective coach and effective coaching sessions. We recognize that coaching is a lot of soft skills, so we're trying to find other ways to possibly present some of that content. And so you'll hear about more on that soon. There's the how to design a TCI program, which is really stage 2 in the program design. And the next slide will show you more on that. And then adaptation. So during the initial kickoff, if you will, the master training of trainers and coaches, we came up with some adaptation guidance for how to adapt any of the proven approaches. And it's largely based off of some of the Centers for Disease Control materials and evidence in the past. And then data for decision making, we have a number of great tools included on there, as well as based on an M&E meeting that occurred last September. We also tried to update that content based on specific examples and processes at each hub level. And then resource mobilization, in this case, really goes through kind of 3 different areas, and it's very broad or at a higher level. There is a good resource there though for like a chart for how to kind of evaluate resource mobilization opportunities. And then also from TCI Essentials, the landing page, you can get directly to the insiders. And if you haven't registered or visited the insiders, I'm going to make a big plug, because that's how you can get on our monthly internal newsletter and see all the archives from that. So I will show you that in a minute as well. Pardon me. So I wanted to spend some time, since I showed you where you could find the expression of interest, I wanted to show you the same thing for where you could find the program design. Again, these are templates and the worksheets. So we do recognize that each hub has potentially altered, adapted these to fit its settings. But I wanted to show where at least you can find kind of the initial guidance documents, and also that what's nice about these are they're editable PDFs, and so you can save and go back to at another time and date. The site will email you a link of the saved PDF. So if you prefer this being online, if you don't prefer like a PDF version, we're always open to making changes to TCI University and the content and as much of the functionality as we can. So please let us know if there are ways to make some of these steps in terms of expression of interest and program design easier for you as you carry out coaching on these elements. But each of these blue boxes, essentially, if you click on them, they open up to provide more content for each. But all of the templates, you can download the entire package of templates right here at TCI Program Design Template, or you can just take out the individual worksheets. Sorry, I tried to scroll and it moved me forward. So then I wanted to also show you TCI Insiders. So as I mentioned on the Essentials, you can click on this password protected section, and the password is thinkering. So not tinkering, but thinkering. And you will get to this space where it reminds you of the shared vision and goals. There's a really great brief video on what TCI is. You can sign up for the monthly TCI Insiders newsletter. You can review any past issues that you might have missed. It includes a timeline of TCI's history, and it gives you quick links to key pages and areas of TCI University, including even the Power BI dashboard, as well as the password for the Power BI dashboard. So we really created this space as an easy reference page or one-stop shop for orientation and for you all as coaches. So there's also an assessment at the bottom, and usually when new staff start, I ask them to review this page, go to the different links that are associated with it, and then take the assessment as part of their orientation and let me know what they didn't get right. So then we can discuss maybe those elements in more detail. So then there's the global AYO Rage Toolkit. I wanted to share a little bit as to how it came about in case folks have missed the master training of coaches and trainers on that. So the AYO Rage Toolkit came afterwards, as many of you know, largely because geographies were, as they were completing their program designs, they were identifying teenage pregnancy as a critical issue. And so although the URIs had evidence of impact, specifically in Nigeria and Kenya for reaching the adolescent and youth population, it wasn't necessarily a targeted program for adolescents and youth. So what we did was we reviewed all the URI documentation, and then we did a global literature scan, as well as conducted interviews in Kenya, Nigeria, Senegal, and India about different AY models that showed promise and evidence. And then we also engaged subject matter experts and youth as beta testers. So from that literature scan and the inputs, we worked very closely with Torchlight Collective, which is a group that specializes in adolescent and youth programming and a lot of advocacy work as well, to come up with kind of the how-to guidance and tools. So most of the tools are definitely more global tools than having come from the URIs. And it's listed under TCI University Toolkits right after Global Toolkit. So again, you need to log in if you want to really take the assessments. So if you don't log in, so at least in this example, I show you where I didn't log in, I went directly to the link. And so then I had the login button right next to coaching. You can also always change the language. In the case of the Global Toolkit and the AYO Rage Toolkit, they've been professionally translated into French. So that should have decent content translations. We used to have the machine translation for Swahili and Hindi, but we received feedback that it was actually quite bad. So as a result, we have removed those because it didn't seem to be useful as they stood. And it costs money to have that on the site. So we can always revisit that at another time. And as I mentioned, just like the global, you can get access to the offline PDF versions. And in this case, that we also have an area for all the references that make up this toolkit, given that it is pulling across a number of areas. And the thing to note is the evidence base for AYSRH, it's not that it doesn't exist, it's that it's still kind of nascent because of just the diverse implication, context in which a program is implemented, and the budget typically surrounding whether or not an evaluation has been paid for by a donor community, and then whether or not that evaluation has been published. So we did look at the gray literature as well as the published literature. And we also try to focus as much as possible on those interventions that had either evidence from an urban environment or that had evidence that felt like it was relevant to an urban environment and potentially scalable. So the differences is you'll see the program areas at the top, and typically you see 3, and so you'd always have to use an arrow to get to the 4th one, but it's structured exactly the same. That all to say, we will be revamping the AYSRH toolkit. We're hoping by March, and so I will share more on that in a minute. But these are the main kind of interventions that are in the AYSRH toolkit. So adolescent and youth friendly services, At one time, we had split those up into the adolescent-friendly providers and adolescent-friendly facilities, but recognizing that the indicators for that are the same, we've combined the guidance around that. Integration expansion of service packages. So that includes integration into different service areas. So PAC, post-abortion care, gender-based violence, HIV, as well as then expanding the method mix. So, you know, that LARCs are appropriate and available to adolescents and youth. And then looking at out-of-facility services. And this is also kind of more of an umbrella approach at this level, because this includes integrated outreaches, this includes pharmacies and drug shops, it includes mobile services, school-based services. So it's at an aggregate level. And then for demand generation, SBC for AYSRH. So again, that's kind of an aggregate. So that can include interpersonal communication, mid-media, mass media. In this case, it even includes gatekeepers. Comprehensive sexuality education is pretty straightforward in terms of that's all it includes. However, in terms of an approach, we all know that can be a very challenging approach to implement, although in terms of scale, it has a lot of potential and sustainability. Gender transformation includes a number of different, typically curriculum-based intervention types. So that's there. And then digital health is considered a promising approach specifically for either getting messages to youth and connecting youth to services. And we have an upcoming webinar with WHO on using digital health for AYSRH outcomes. That is scheduled for the end of September. I believe it's September 24th or 5th. And a save the date email announcement just went out this morning about that. So I'd like to recommend as many of you as possible to sign up for that, please. And then in terms of advocacy, it's looking at the legal environment and then different accountability mechanisms. And then our essentials, again, are cross-cutting areas. As I mentioned, the actual approach page is set up exactly the same as the global, so I'm not going to go through those specifics. But as I mentioned, that we're really looking to revamp the toolkit by March 2022, so that we incorporate examples of TCI's youth programming, and also make sure it better aligns with the concentric circles. So we're making data visible. So right now, data management is a cross-cutting area under essentials. So we will raise that up to be its own area. The advocating for youth-friendly cities. Right now, our advocacy approaches are really more legal environment and accountability, but not as much around like the resource mobilization efforts and the multi-sectoral efforts that are being done. So we will make sure to highlight those better. And then the next level is reaching diverse youth cohorts with messages tailored to their unique needs. So that's really the SBC and demand generation. So we're looking to update that some, and then the service provision and looking specifically at provider bias. So it's not that we're hoping that we'll align it better as well as have it more practical, because in developing it, we developed it based on the literature, but not necessarily on how we've been able to operationalize the literature. So we're hoping that the changes we make by March will be improvements that you all actually are happy to see. But if you ever have any feedback along the way, please let us know. And anything that we may remove, it doesn't mean it's gone forever. We still have copies of things, so we can always add it back or also just send it to you individually. Then I wanted to share a bit about the hub-specific toolkits, and I chose East Africa as an example here, but then provide kind of specific areas of interest that might be valuable for those who aren't familiar with the Nigeria toolkit and the India toolkit to be aware of. So you can easily get to the Hub toolkits either by going to TCI University on the main landing page, or like you can be already working in TCI University. And like I mentioned, there's a drop-down menu from each of the components. And so I was actually in the AYO-Rage toolkit when I hopped over to the East Africa toolkit. And I was just trying to show you how I did that. And I wanted to show you East Africa's specifically because they've already made progress and incorporating some of their AY specific approaches into their toolkit. So I'm highlighting here the adolescent and youth friendly services and the increasing access through pharmacies. So these are different approaches that were already in the global, but that were adapted specifically to their context, that live here for the ease of coaching on them instead of having to point your coachee to multiple areas. They wanted to try to keep things as contained into their own toolkit. Our next step in working with the East Africa team is to look at some of their approaches that are TCI classic and add like tips and guidance for how to reach or make them more AYO-Rage friendly. So that we will continue doing. And in their case, I just wanted to show you their structure. So they have basically a box that you can click on to get more information on each element. And so their structure is, so why is this important? So that relates to kind of what are the benefits. And they start with a brief description of the intervention. They have the evidence. And as I said, they've been making an effort to try to update the evidence from what was under Tupange or Yuri to now what TCI's evidence is, how to conduct, so the steps, some of the key outcomes and monitoring processes, what does success look like in terms of indicators, costs, and usually these are cost considerations so that it's not direct financial numbers per se, since each context and geography it will be different, but like cost considerations and then sustainability considerations. And in this case, the tools for kind of implementing these are often integrated into the descriptions of each of these boxes. Or we also have them appear right under integrated family planning outreach. You can see that there's kind of an indentation with relevant tools related. And I don't know if you can see my mouse, but I'm trying to circle them. And then for every hub, we have looked at the approach and we've worked with you to distill it to its essential elements. And it made it into this job aid, which is typically no more than a 2-pager. The rationale for this was recognizing that certain geographies might want to adapt a proven approach. What are the key elements that we'd want to make sure are still in place versus like where are the areas that adaptation would be okay? So I think this is helpful, one, in terms of as we start thinking about the graduation process and any follow-up, these would be helpful tools to be like, oh, so you're still conducting integrated outreaches. That's fantastic. Let's look at the job aid together and what elements of this are you still implementing and what have you changed, so that we can be more aware of if the outcomes have changed, why might that be? Also, I think these are particularly useful because you can download them and print them out, and it's, like I said, only 2 pages or so. As a result, these might be, if you need to do translations of content for certain groups, it might be best to start with those since it's really synthesized down to the key elements. And as you could see here, like you could see the take the notes button and functionality is throughout the entire TCI University. So that is available there as well. And I wanted to show you this too, because as I mentioned, we are starting to integrate the assessments throughout each hub specific toolkit based on feedback we received. Oh, great. I have a hand raised. Look at, someone knows how to use this. I don't. If you have a question, if you want to just type it into the chat box, I will get to it right away. I don't know if you hand raised on purpose or not, but thank you. I didn't know that was possible. So we are working to do this. We started with the East Africa Toolkit. We are moving to adding the assessment questions to Nigeria. Then we will get to the India Toolkit. Packet Pator is being updated as a whole. So as we update those proven approaches, we will create the assessments as well. And then based on the feedback we got during the annual meeting, we also integrated any blog posts specifically related to an approach has been incorporated into that approach a page so that visitors can see things happening kind of in action or real life. As you have any feedback or questions or suggestions for improvement, please let us know. As I said, the idea is that TCI University is a living resource, so we should be making efforts to update content as well as the look and feel to keep people coming. So if there are ways in which we can do that better, please let us know. So as I mentioned, I did want to highlight a few specific areas within the other toolkit. So I think the Nigeria toolkit would be of interest to those of the other hubs, given that it does have a fourth approach area. So each hub has service delivery, demand generation, and advocacy. Nigeria also has a program area on monitoring, evaluation, and learning, and some of its coaching specifically related to data tool needs assessment, data quality assessment, family plan and data review. They also have this great chart as to like how the data auditing works kind of in the Nigerian context. And then they've also included their conference abstracts and presentations in this area. So this is an area that might be of particular interest as each hub starts to document more related to its kind of D for D. We know that's a big effort across the board. So we'll want to make sure to add that approach to your specific toolkits. Okay. Oh, thank you for the suggestion, Yamasi. We can definitely do that. She's making suggestions that to the TCI Insiders, we add TCI's core principles, the values, and our theory of change. And you're right, those are missing from that page. So that's definitely stuff that we should add. Thank you. Ooh, sorry, I clicked. Also, I wanted to share related to the Nigeria toolkit that's unique approaches that might be of interest to the other hubs. So the enabling environment in the context of Nigeria includes their net mapping, their policy score assessment, their advocacy core groups, and there's a third, and I'm forgetting that third, I think. But so they also have the champions and they have media advocacy. But in terms of, I know for FWA in particular, it's really interested in like the guidelines around the advocacy core group. At one point, I know East Africa was very interested in net mapping. And so those can all be found in the enabling environment, which is under their advocacy. Also under their advocacy program area, resource mobilization, it talks a lot about how they go about the budget line item, budget task teams, as well as at least a brief introduction to the performance-based tracker, which I think we'll be adding more to as kind of the year rolls out. So those are kind of unique features that I thought would be of interest. In terms of unique features that I thought would be of interest for the teams on this call related to the India toolkit is Under their advocacy approach, they have planning and budgeting, and it outlines the government's kind of budget cycle and process and how that can be utilized by the state governments. So that is a kind of, I know it's unique to the Indian context, but I also thought it's an interesting way of making sure that that information that sometimes resides in different people's heads or in different documents and can sometimes vary greatly is codified in one space. So that I think would be of interest. Utilizing data effectively. So their data for decision-making approach lives under their advocacy area, and that also has been turned into like those 2-page job aids. And then they have a mapping urban slums that may be of particular interest given the population dynamics in your specific context. And so they have explicit instructions and guidelines related to that. And then as I mentioned, so similar to East Africa is they have cost element considerations. And in their case, it's mapped directly to how you'd be able to allocate or kind of request money for these elements based on the government's budgeting process and guidelines. And then they have sustainability considerations, and they have as a hub translated their approach pages into Hindi as well as Oriya. And we've created buttons and downloadable PDFs for them based on those translations. So in addition, there's the resource collection. So that's kind of the fourth element down from the toolkit area. So you have global toolkit, AYO Rage, hub specific, and then resource collection. And I just wanted to show that many of these resources are linked and available within a specific approach page. However, you or a visitor to the site might find it easier to simply use the filters at the left to find what you're looking for if you're in a hurry or know only some information about the resource but not others. So each of these filters are drop-down menus, and you can kind of select and then hit submit, and then it will populate just those specific tools. So for folks that don't know, engagement has rewards on TCI. And so if you basically make a post to the community of practice, if you reply to a post, if you take an assessment in the toolkit, if you pass that assessment, if you score 100% on that assessment, you earn points along the way. You earn points for registering. So anyone who registers should have some level of points. And then your points or badges help you get to these different rankings. And we can always discuss if you would like this changed. But this is just kind of how the system is set up currently. So quickly, the next element, the community of practice. We had a webinar about the community of practice a while back, so I'm not going to go into all the functionality. I'm happy to provide those slides though, if you would like more details on the community of practice. But the community of practice, now anyone who registers with TCI becomes an automatic member of the community of practice. That wasn't initially how the site was set up, but that is how it's been for the majority of the time now. So at least 95 to 98% of registered users are also members of the COP. So we have this overarching COP for all of TCI, and then we have groups that have specific interests either related to AY or to your specific hubs. And then any new members you can see easily along the side. This is just to show you that you can easily post a photo, you can comment, you can like. As I'm an admin, so I can delete, or if it's spam, I can block it. Basically, ways to make your posts more personal. I just wanted to suggest maybe going to your profile and adding a photo. And so your profile is right up next to like login. Once you log in, the profile is on that top banner on the website, and you would just go to profile, and then you can do edit and change profile photo. And it gives you these other elements for you to always look at. I will definitely share the slides and the audio recording after. Thanks for joining. And then another way to make your post more personable would be doing the @ and the person's name or username, however they've logged in, which you can find on their profile. And so adding the @ with that, their profile username, and then commenting, because then they will definitely know. Also, I'd say liking to know that someone's responding is very helpful. So coaching, that's our third element. Oh, I don't know why it stopped sharing. Let me see. Okay. I sounded like my grandmother there. Okay, so I'm almost done, I promise. So, but for coaching, there's really two functions. It's that you can either get to the coaching group or you can get to the on-demand coaching form. We received really good feedback during the annual meeting about the need to actually add more content. Okay, now I see my slides, but you don't. Sorry. Let's see if this works again.
That worked.
Okay, woo, quick recovery. So as I mentioned, there's the coaching request form. And so that comes automatically to myself, to our info email address, as well as to a coach champion from each of the hub national or headquartered teams. And we usually try to triage those together, where I might provide an initial response, and then usually the hub coaching champion will do follow-up with either sharing it with other colleagues that can follow up or answer the question more specifically, or provide additional supports. And then, like I said, it's the coaching group. We're looking to update content for the coaching group. We're thinking about housing that though within the toolkit still. So we are in the works on that, and we will come back to you in the coming months with more. We're also looking at doing kind of book clubs, and then sharing out kind of learnings from the different coaching evidence base that we can find. So that we started that, I'd say, last year. We're just slow to picking it up this year. And then if you need help, so one of the biggest questions we often get are related to, say, certificates, for instance. So if you're logged into TCI University, next to the 3 elements of Toolkits, community practice, and coaching, you can go to home, and there's a drop down that says help and support. And on that page, you can find tutorial videos on registering for TCI University and key features. We have exploring the toolkits, functionality for communities of practice, as well as even navigating the app. So those short videos are all housed there. And then we have these frequently asked questions that if you click on any of these, they're like accordion boxes. So they'll open with more details answering a specific question. And then you can also always ask a question, like request support directly from here. So, but I did want to show you, if you can't find your certificate. So as I mentioned, your profile is right up at the top bar. After you've logged in, you have a log out and a profile. If you go to your profile, and before I showed you how you might change your photo, which would be go to profile, and then a new set of blue buttons would show up related to your photo. But instead of doing that, if you go to program areas, because all of your certificates are related to your toolkits, and your toolkit quiz questions are all associated to a specific program area, then you can look. And the thing with this is we recognize it's not the most intuitive. So in order to open up an area, you have to, there's an arrow that's pointing horizontally, you want it to point down. So you would click on it so that points down, and then it would open up basically the different interventions or approaches within that program area, and you could see which one you completed. There'd be a certificate with the little icon, and you could click on that and it would download the PDF certificate. It'd show you your score and stats and when you completed that. So I knew this was a long one. So I appreciate you hanging in there with me, and I wanted to offer an opportunity for any questions that you may have. So if you want to type them into the chat box, we really hope that was helpful, especially given the feedback we received during the annual meeting. So please, if you have any initial questions, feel free to type them in. You can also reflect on it and always email us. We're here to really make sure that TCI University is as useful to you as a coach as possible. So we're really open to the feedback. The question about the certificate. So it is true that about every 2 weeks or so, there's some kind of glitch with, it's a technical plugin, and we know that's the case, and we've been reporting it to the developers, but it happens every 2 weeks, and we're not exactly sure why it does, but we make sure it's always resolved. But we'll continue to looking into that, and if Kim finds more information, we will do so.
Yeah, if you just want to let me know if you see that, let me know immediately and I can fix it. But it's something that happens, like Lisa said, every 10 to 14 days. And we've been back and forth with the developers in our server trying to fix it. I'm actually online with them right now trying to work on it.
So it's something that's a little bit out of our control, but if you alert us to it, we'll do our best to try to remedy it as quickly as possible. Oh, it is Happy Teacher's Day. What timing? Thanks, Dawood, for congratulations to you all. We see you all as the deans, the faculty and deans of TCI University. So Happy Teacher's Day to you all. We have about 2 more minutes if there are any comments or questions. We're also in the process of finishing up the TCIU user online survey analysis, and have been following up with a few coachees for interviews. So hopefully by the end of September or so, maybe early October, but I'm hoping end of September, we'll have that report available and can share that. And if you think like doing webinars like this on some kind of frequent basis would be helpful, please do let us know. Based on what we find in that survey, we might implement more improvements. We're very interested to see how having assessments per hub toolkit, how that might encourage additional engagement. So we're hoping to see a big change in terms of increase, continued increase come this coming year. Well, we're at the 8 o'clock hour. So and in your case, it's definitely not 8 o'clock hour, it's much later. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And we'll follow up with the slides and recording shortly. Have a great rest of your day and evening.
Bye.
Bye.